Thousands of miles from here, off the coast of Japan, some believe they have found evidence of another lost kingdom.
In 1986, a diving instructor stumbled onto something that should not exist at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. He was not an archaeologist. He was not on a research expedition. He was alone, 27 meters beneath the surface, off the coast of a small Japanese island most Americans have never heard of. What he found that day was a structure so precise, so angular, so deliberately geometric, that he surfaced immediately and told his team they needed to see it. They went down, they came back up. Nobody spoke for a long time, because sitting on the ocean floor, perfectly preserved, was what appeared to be a massive stone monument, with flat walls, sharp 90-degree corners, carved staircases, and interior passages that ran deeper than any scan had ever reached. This is the Yonaguni Monument, and what the scan found inside it changes everything we thought we knew. Yonaguni-jima is a tiny island at the southwestern tip of Japan. Population under 1,800 people. It sits closer to Taiwan than it does to Tokyo, which is part of why the Western world largely ignored what was discovered beneath its waters. The island is known for one thing among divers: its hammerhead sharks. Hundreds of them migrate through Yonaguni's currents every winter. It was a shark dive that brought Kihachiro Arataki into those waters in January of 1986. He was the dive tour operator for the island. He knew the waters better than almost anyone alive, and he had never seen the rock formation he was about to find. What Aratake encountered that day became known as the Yonaguni Monument, a massive formation sitting on the ocean floor at depths between 5 and 40 meters, stretching approximately 50 meters wide, 25 meters tall, and 150 meters long at its base. To give you a Western reference point, the main structure is roughly the same footprint as a Manhattan city block, except it was carved, or formed, or built. That word is still the subject of violent academic disagreement, somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. That is older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than virtually every monument we have ever attributed to ancient civilization. If this structure is man-made, it rewrites the entire timeline of human history. For decades, the Yonaguni Monument was treated as a curiosity. Japanese authorities acknowledged it. A handful of geologists visited. A few archaeologists wrote papers arguing over whether it was natural or constructed. The debate ran in circles, because nobody had the technology to answer the question properly. Then, in 2023, an independent research team deployed a multi-beam sonar array combined with AI-assisted photogrammetry to produce the first complete three-dimensional interior scan of the Yonaguni Formation. This was not a surface scan. This was the kind of deep penetration imaging that militaries use to map underground bunkers. And what it returned was something none of the team members were prepared to see. The exterior of the monument, the staircases, the flat terraces, the vertical walls had already been mapped by divers. That data was not new. What was new was what the AI flagged inside. Because the Yonaguni Monument is not solid, deep within the primary structure, the scan detected a network of interior spaces, passages, chambers, corridors that begin at the base of the main terrace and descend further than the naked eye can follow. The AI cross-referenced the dimensional data against every known natural geological formation on Earth. The probability that these interior passages formed naturally, through erosion, through wave action, through seismic activity, came back at less than 3%. The team ran the scan again. The number did not change. Less than 3%. Here is what that means. Either something or someone carved the interior of this structure with extraordinary precision before it sank beneath the ocean. Or there is a geological process at work on the floor of the Pacific that we do not have a name for. Neither answer is comfortable. If you are still here, you already know this is not a normal discovery story. The data we are walking through is the kind that gets buried fast. Papers disappear. Researchers go quiet. The last team that published a full interior analysis of this structure was quietly defunded 6 months after publication. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because what the scan found inside the deepest chamber of Yonaguni is something every mainstream institution has refused to put in writing. And we are not going to bury it. Let us start with what is visible, because the visible evidence alone is enough to end the debate. The Yonaguni Monument contains a feature that geologists call the Grand Staircase. It is a series of broad, flat stone steps ascending the southern face of the structure, each step approximately 1 meter in height and 3 meters in depth, running the full width of the formation. Now, if you have ever seen how rock erodes naturally, how ocean waves cut into cliffs, how seismic pressure fractures stone, you know that erosion does not produce staircases. Erosion produces curves, it produces gradients, it produces irregular surfaces that slope and crumble in unpredictable patterns. The Grand Staircase at Yonaguni does none of that. Each step is geometrically consistent. Each riser is within centimeters of the same height as every other riser. The platform surfaces are level to a degree that the AI scan flagged as statistically improbable for natural formation. Dr. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus, who spent 15 years diving the monument, documented over a dozen such precision-cut features on the structure. His conclusion, published in academic literature, was direct. These features are consistent with human construction, not natural erosion. The academic community responded to his conclusion the way it always responds when the timeline gets uncomfortable. They ignored it. Everything you just heard, the staircase, the geometry, the precision-cut features, 15 years of documented evidence, none of that is the part that stopped the research team cold. That part is inside, and it is deeper than any diver has physically reached. Now we go inside, because this is where the scan produced data that the research team did not share publicly. For 4 months, when the AI-assisted sonar penetrated the interior of the main structure, it mapped 3 distinct enclosed spaces. The first is a passage running parallel to the northern face of the monument, approximately 2 meters wide and 1.8 meters tall. Exactly the dimensions required for a human being to walk upright through it without ducking. That is not a coincidence geology produces. The second is a deeper chamber, located roughly 12 meters below the monument's upper terrace. The chamber is roughly circular, approximately 8 meters in diameter. The walls of the chamber, according to the scan data, are not raw rock. They show evidence of surface treatment, areas of uniform smoothness inconsistent with natural stone, interspersed with what the AI identified as possible carved recesses at regular intervals along the chamber wall. The research team brought in a stone analysis specialist from Kyoto University, who reviewed the scan data without being told where it came from. She identified the surface patterns as consistent with human tool marks on sandstone, the same signature left by other ancient structures found on dry land across Asia. She was told, after she submitted her analysis, that the surfaces were 27 meters underwater. Her response, according to one team member who documented it, was to sit down and say nothing for a very long time. The third interior space is the one nobody has spoken about publicly, and it is the one that should concern you most. Before we go there, stop and hold the picture for a moment. Imagine a sealed safe inside a sealed building, inside a city that has been sitting underwater for 10,000 years. Nobody alive knows the safe exists. Nobody has a key. Nobody knows what is in it. The building has been down there since before the Egyptian pyramids were built, before Stonehenge was raised, before any civilization we have ever named left its first mark on history. That is what the scan found at the lowest level of Yonaguni. And what is inside that safe is why the permit was rejected. The third space is located at the lowest accessible point of the interior scan, roughly 27 meters below the ocean surface, buried within the base of the monument itself. It is not a passage. It is not a circular chamber. The AI scan returned a rectangular space, approximately 6 meters long, 4 meters wide, and 3 meters high. The geometry was so precise that the algorithm flagged it as a possible data error on first return. The team recalibrated and rescanned. The rectangular chamber was still there. But what the AI identified inside that chamber is what stopped the research team from publishing for 4 months. Because embedded in the floor of that chamber, at 27 meters depth, inside a structure that has been submerged for at least 10,000 years, the sonar returned the signature of objects, distinct, separate objects, arranged in what the AI calculated as a non-random spatial pattern. Not stalactites, not rock formations, objects. Their dimensions were consistent with carved stone artifacts, not unlike the ritual objects recovered from ancient sites across Southeast Asia, including several found at Sanxingdui in China and at pre-Angkorian temple sites in Cambodia. The team contacted Japanese maritime authorities to request a permit for physical access to the chamber. The permit was denied. No reason was given in writing. The application was simply returned, stamped with a single word: rejected. The objects in that chamber have not been physically examined. They have not been photographed. They have not been removed. They are still down there. And no government agency with jurisdiction over Yonaguni's waters has explained why no one is allowed to go get them. Here is what the mainstream position says. The official consensus, repeated across Wikipedia entries, university geology textbooks, and mainstream science publications, is that the Yonaguni Monument is a natural formation. The argument goes like this. Sandstone fractures along natural fault lines, and Yonaguni sits in a seismically active region where such fracturing could produce angular shapes, flat surfaces, right angles, stepped formations. All of it, according to the consensus view, is what you get when you combine the right rock type with the right seismic pressure and enough time. That argument has 3 problems. The first problem is the interior passages. Natural fracturing does not produce enclosed interior corridors with human-proportioned dimensions. Seismic activity does not carve rectangular chambers 27 meters below the surface. The physics do not support the explanation. The second problem is the distribution of angular features across the structure. If the monument were a natural formation produced by random geological processes, the angular features should be distributed randomly, some here, some there, with irregular spacing and inconsistent geometry. They are not. The precision-cut features on the monument are clustered, consistent, and oriented in ways that align with a deliberate architectural plan. The AI analysis mapped the angular geometry across the full structure and identified a repeating spatial logic, the same kind of logic found in designed buildings, not in eroding rock. The third problem is the objects in the deepest chamber. Because no natural geological explanation accounts for discrete, spatially arranged objects inside a sealed rectangular space at the base of an underwater structure. Geology does not arrange things, something else does. Now here is the part that pulls this out of academic debate and into something much larger. The Yonaguni Monument began sinking beneath the ocean surface approximately 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. That date is not disputed. Even the geologists who argue the structure is natural agree on the timeline. The sea level rise that submerged Yonaguni occurred at the end of the last ice age, when glaciers melted across the planet and ocean levels rose dramatically over a period of centuries. That means whatever is at Yonaguni, natural or man-made, existed above water during the period when mainstream history insists civilization had barely begun. We are told that 10,000 years ago, humans were living in scattered hunter-gatherer bands. We are told that organized construction, architectural planning, and monument building didn't begin until about 5,000 years ago, with Sumeria, with early Egypt, with the earliest known cities. Yonaguni was already on the ocean floor by then. If the structure is man-made, then someone was building things of this scale 5,000 years before we thought it was possible. Not somewhere. Right here, in the waters of the Pacific, in a region that later gave rise to some of the most sophisticated ancient cultures on Earth. And here is what the AI cross-referenced that nobody is talking about. The spatial orientation of the Yonaguni Monument, the axis along which the main terrace runs, aligns, within less than 1 degree of error, with the astronomical orientation documented at 3 other ancient sites in the same Pacific region. The alignment is consistent with deliberate celestial positioning. The probability of that alignment occurring by chance across 4 sites is, according to the AI's calculation, less than 1 in 11 million. Someone planned this. Someone measured the sky. Someone built something meant to last longer than any civilization we have ever recorded. And then the ocean took it, and we forgot it existed, until a shark diver went looking in the wrong direction and found the right thing. Here is what sits with you after the scan data settles. The Yonaguni Monument is not a theory. It is not folklore. It is not a blurry photograph or an anonymous claim. It is a physical structure sitting on the floor of the Pacific Ocean that you can dive to, touch, and swim through, if the Japanese government lets you near it. Which, increasingly, it will not. The question of whether it is natural or constructed is almost beside the point now, because even if you accept the natural explanation, and the scan data makes that harder and harder to do, you are still left with a structure of this geometry sitting in waters that were dry land when the first great human migrations were spreading across the globe. This was shore, this was land. People walked here, and whatever they left behind, whether it was a monument they built or a natural formation they chose as sacred, it went down with the ocean. Here is what that means for you personally. The people who stood on this shore 10,000 years ago were not a separate branch of humanity. They were not a distant ancient species you read about in textbooks. They were your ancestors. The same genetic line that eventually produced you passed through people who may have looked up at this structure, touched these walls, walked these staircases before the water came. Whatever knowledge was held in this place, whatever was stored in that sealed chamber at 27 meters depth, was supposed to reach you. You were supposed to inherit it. The ocean took it instead. And now a government stamp on a rejected permit is the last thing standing between us and finding out what that knowledge actually was. It has been waiting, 27 meters under, for someone with the right technology to finally ask the right questions. We asked them. The answers came back. And the permit to go get the objects in that deepest chamber is still sitting in a government office in Tokyo, stamped rejected, with no explanation attached. What do they already know? What are they protecting? And what else is down there that the scan has not reached yet? Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because this channel goes where the data leads. And the data is pointing somewhere that the institutions responsible for protecting these sites have spent decades making sure you never find.